if we could take the blinders off.
Yeah.
Don't answer to the call of how different we are as a human race, but how similar we are with all our different names and all our different experiences and all our similar human actions. Wow, we would be in a different place than we are right now, I think.
We would be. I found your poetry, I did my MFA through UTEP. And I first read I read Head Off and Split in that program. And it's just really cool to see you on the other side of my computer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for reaching out so far across the water. I'm so happy to be invited to be a part of the audience and the citizenry of Poetry on the Move. We need this now. We need it always, but we especially need it now. And also because I feel so drawn to your topic. The archival interest, the archival theme is so important to me. And it's important to me because when I started out writing and thinking about words and literature and the music of language, I was steeped in my culture, being an African American, being from a culture that had the history that it had being forced into the Americas. And I wanted to know more, couldn't find out more from my teachers because there was I felt, I didn't know this then, but the more questions I asked about the history of African Americans in South Carolina, which is where I'm greeting you from and where I was born, I found that the doors were shut. Even so, when I was born, the libraries in my small town would not allow Black people to check out a book, to even enter, to use the facility and to check out a book. And so when we talk about archival, the word is so important to me because I love books. My mother raised me to, basically in her lap, reading fairy tales and stories and singing songs and turning the page and smelling the book. And so the book is really important to me as a child and as an adult and as a woman and as a writer. But I also find that the archivalness of being a human being, of being Black in America, means that some of those stories that I should have, I don't have. So my inquiry as a poet and my inquiry as an outlier and my inquiry as a curious-minded human being is also has to do with the archives of the belly, the archives of the mind, the archives of the interior of human beings. So I find that, and I hope that your conference and your poets and your audience talks about where the archival geography of the interior space meets the archival place in the library or in the museum or in those spaces that sometimes some people cannot enter freely. Yeah. And so that's just a fascinating through line, if you will, for me as a poet. And because I pluck things from both. I can go into a library now. I can go into a museum now. Sometimes I'm looked at a little strangely, like, what does she want? And then I say, I'm a poet, and I always have my pencils, so you don't have to take my pens and exchange my pencils for me. I'm ready. Yeah. But so this topic is just a jewel for me, really, to talk into.
My own work is using archives and really trying to use that to give women voice from different eras. Yeah, you think of the Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Can't go in the library without a man.
Right. Yeah. So it's like So it's like, if we keep chipping away at this word, this huge statue of a word called the archives, right?
Yeah, it is a statue of
Right?
a word.
It's a statue of a word, and you're not supposed to, don't mess with it, leave it alone. It's there for a reason. It represents the canon, and it represents all those things. It does not allow people of color, women, LGBTQ people,
Yep.
you know, all around the world to like access it. And so the reason, the fact that you pull it in front of us tonight, and you pull it in front of me, I love it. And I don't know, I've been very excited ever since Vaughn said this was your theme, and I was like, oh yes, well this call was meant to be then.
Cool. Yeah.
So should I read some?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna read, first I wanna talk about my Uncle Freddie, who in my family, I didn't realize it then, but he was the outlier in his generation of my family. When he would come into the room, people would start mumbling and going, uh-oh, Freddie's here. We don't know what he's gonna do. He never had money in his pocket. He only had the almanac, because at night, when all the farmers in the town were asleep, he would go outside and read the stars.
Yeah.
And with reading the stars, he realized what he wanted to plant the next day. It was fascinating to me. So as I got older, I realized that Uncle Freddie was the outlier in his generation. I was the outlier in my generation. And so I wrote this poem about him. He went to a college, like a community college, and he took a course in astronomy. And he wrote a paper back in 1959. And he said, he predicted in this paper that somebody would one day walk on the moon.
Ah.
And so he hands me the paper out of his closet. It's in a plastic sleeve. And he says,
oh,
and at the top of the paper is a big red F. The teacher didn't believe him. No, the teacher didn't believe him.
Oh.
And so he said, because you're the next generation and people won't believe you either, I'm giving you this paper. Okay. The Black Orion. The starman was Frederick J. Davenport, 1903 to 1992. In his orbiting eyes, we are all slaves. There are more new ones of us born every day, slavish to things we cannot do without, slavish to whatever is new and fandangled, polished and pearled. In his cornfield, while waiting for grouse to stir, to shoot and freeze for Christmas, he told me, I am leaving a world of slaves behind, girls, so what am I really leaving? It's time to go when that's all that's left. Each of you, he said, are every letter of the wanting rainbow. No wonder you define loneliness by what you do not have. There, at least, he said, I'll be around things that aren't so beholding. A man who did not know that things had ever changed because he beheld the sky as something that may shift, but was forever dependably exact. A man who did not believe that things should ever change. His only concern was up. His channel was the shifting sky and the always ground. He found scripture in the tissue-thin pages of the almanac. A man who did not want to know the answer to it all, who liked it the old way, just fine. In college astronomy, 1959, Fred J. Davenport wrote a paper. He predicted that in 10 years, more or less, a man would walk the moon. And would he be a slave too, Uncle? Of course he would, he said, if he turned around and came back here. Handing in these dreamy notions to learned men who graded him poorly. Slaves, he said of them all, as he sat before their limited eyes. Slaves would only see it as illuminated soil. The starman saw it as real and therefore walkable. His prediction missed by only weeks. So the archive of my family.
Yes.
I'm right. So
that's it. Get out of the closet, right? He pulls it out of the closet in what did you say, in plastic?
In a plastic sleeve. Like no one had ever been in this room before. No one had ever seen this paper he wrote. No one ever even knew he went to a college. He was a farmer, but he was passing on to me something that was like a diamond in a box, because it was his paper that no one had believed would come true.
Suddenly I'm realizing there's this connection. I mean, obviously this works on so many levels, right? The idea of archives does, but I'm thinking how that connects then with ways of knowing, right? The outlier has a different way of knowing, a different way of understanding. And that's really what that taps into.
When I left for college, my grandmother, who was across the street from Uncle Freddie, farming woman, graduated from high school, did not go to college. She said, I just want to put one last thing in your hand. She said, you're feeding your head, and that's beautiful, because she knew how much I love stories and literature. She said, but your belly talks to you as well. When you are near something and something tells you, don't get in that car, don't walk down that street, this person does not mean you well, listen to your belly. Yeah. And I was like, what is she talking about? The moment I left home and the moment those adults weren't around me anymore, that brain in the middle of my body kicked in. So what you are saying to me is absolutely what I know to be true.
Yeah.
On that farm that I was raised on in the summer, my mother's people, my matrilineal line, I wrote this poem. I'm just going to read an excerpt, but they were Black farmers, and I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to document the privilege of being a Black family who owned land, because many Black people did not. And so those 93 acres that my grandfather owned and worked, that he bought in the early 20th century, right before the Great Depression, were sacred land to the family, still in the family now. And anyway, one of the things that I wanted to document was what it was like to live on that land in the summertime. And so this is just again, a documentation of my family archives put on paper that mean the world to me, because it stamps that wandering, and how I came to be the poet that I came to be. It's called Coda. And it came out of the image of, there were only 2 beds in my grandparents' house, the one they slept in and whoever else came to visit. And if it was 1 person or 4, that's the bed you slept in, right? We are 4 to a bed, so close our hips must come with hinges. A ticking of brown family thrown across the cotton and feather mattress of winter, tucked deep inside the house my grandfather raised up from the red earth straight into the woolly air. The black and white photograph isn't supposed to predict the future, but my mother looks like my unborn brother. And even at 3, I am different. My tiny Black girl eyes are a queer shade of green. At 5, my older brother stands there on the end, already buttoned into my father's sense of place. We are so close in this cherry bed, our lightly touching hips must surely be hinged. Even the children have them. Daddy has moved into place next to Mama. Mama has moved in next to me. I am the only one awake, the only one with a wall. The whole house has fallen asleep. The movie begins. Uncle Billy is just home from Vietnam. He is the baby. In the ruddy speckled flicker, he stands before us with a new camera that the war bought for him. I call Uncle Billy the Bonneville man. Just like Pop Leo, he can fix anything. Unlike him, he will only drive a car if it's long and pretty. 30 years later, the Bonneville man will die with AIDS, alone in another bed without hinges. A dozen headlights polka dot the night screen wall. Every long, pretty car he ever owned drives by to pay their last respect. He snaps the picture of us all, and horns blow out in a scatter like blue Cadillac whales. We are a charm bracelet of a family bedding down for the night. We are in the outback of my mother's country. We have been laid flat for the sake of photography. The elder Aborigines bump room to rafter, watching us amazed. They whisper how much we resemble early black and white TV. This is a part of the archive of who I am, my family, and also being Southern and rural and landowners and Black with that history as well.
Yeah.
And that's what that's the power of poetry. That's the power of art.
Yeah.
That, you know, that it's gonna provoke us a little bit. It's gonna prod us a little bit. It's gonna make us think outside the box. Hopefully, that's what it should do.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do, right?
Make us a little uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this.
Kimberly, I can't thank you enough, and I can't wait.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna be there one day. Tell everybody hello, and keep reading, and keep believing, and keep telling the truth.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be well. Okay.